Well, good morning. Thank you, you brave souls, for coming out on this chilly winter morning. I was invited to be here by Amelia 2 or maybe 3 months ago. This is a Sunday when most settled ministers are not in their own pulpits because they're exhausted from Christmas Eve activities. And so those of us who are retired get called into service, and that's one of the main reasons that I'm here with you this morning, and I'm glad to be here. This is my third or maybe fourth time to be a guest preacher for you, and it's good to see a few familiar faces and some of those of you whom I've not met yet. Well, 4 weeks of the Christian season of Advent came to an end last Wednesday evening. Traditionally, 4 weeks of waiting, of expectation, of hoping for an event, a gift, a person who will set things right, the Messiah who will bring liberation or comfort or salvation. Here in this congregation, and along with UU congregations around the country and in Europe, and maybe hundreds and millions of congregations, Christian congregations around the world, you sang those familiar carols. Hark the herald angels sing, angels we have heard on high, O little town of Bethlehem. But now our Christmas Eve songs of joy and gladness have ended. The songs have ended, but not the joy and gladness. The angels have gone away. We have 3 more days until January 31st, when the ball will drop on New York's Times Square, and it will be time to sing Auld Lang Syne, maybe at that New Year's party that someone's going to have this Wednesday. And so here we are. It's December 28th. It's the 3rd day of Kwanzaa. Baby Jesus is 3 days old, beginning his life in a world of tyranny and oppression, where he and his people will be jerked around by agents of the Roman Empire, where a new King Herod will wantonly slay innocent children and rebuild the Jerusalem the Jerusalem temple into a lavish palace for himself and his cronies. It's deceptively and depressingly familiar, isn't it? My colleague, the Reverend Jason Cook, recently described our own world in our own times with these words. Today's weather report is in. There will be ice this winter, the kind that makes roads impassable, that runs a chill down the spine, that cools the heart. There will be ice this winter, the kind that betrays freedom, that freezes hope before it learns to shine. There will be ice this winter to greet the child in the manger, not with gold or myrrh, but with handcuffs and a one-way ticket into the cold. And yet, tomorrow's forecast, there will be fire, fires lit by courage, by sanctuary, by people who refuse to let love grow numb. Fire flickers where people gather. Fire flickers in the shelter that we make, bodies placed between what is tender and the bitter north wind. This is the Christmas fire, not a blaze, just a candle. Enough light to soften what winter hardens, keeping tenderness alive. A couple of months ago, when she invited me to preach this morning, Amelia told me that choosing hope was going to be your worship theme for this month of December. So I've been thinking about the meaning of hope, what kind of thing hope is. In a poem that I'm sure many of you know, Emily Dickinson said, "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. I think there is a clue to understanding something important about hope in that little snippet. Singing a tune without words points toward the idea that hope doesn't have to be focused on anything specific, anything described or describable in words. We can live with an attitude or a posture of hope. We can go through life in that way, of an attitude and a posture of hopefulness in the midst of uncertainty, without knowing what's going to happen. In other words, there's one way that we talk about hope as hoping that such and such will happen. We do this all the time. I hope our party won't get rained out. I hope my candidate will win the next election. I hope that our church's pledge drive will exceed its goal. All kinds of hopes, specific hopes we have. But in contrast, there's the idea of living with a conviction or a faith in the possibility of goodness without any specific good outcome in mind. The Reverend Dr. Cynthia Bourgeot is a modern-day contemplative mystic and an Episcopal priest. Writing about this deeper kind of hope, she says, "Our great mistake is that we tie hope to outcome, and thus hope is complicated." Hope is Complicated is the title of a chapter in this book by Brian McLaren called Life After Doom, which may be descriptive of how many of us are feeling these days. Likewise, this season of Christmas carols of both joy and sober reflection, this season of joyful singing in the midst of darkness, this political season of maniacal tyranny and magical hope, it's complicated. One of my favorite lines in all of the Christmas carols, and I know you sang this one Wednesday evening because I looked at your order of service, "O little town of Bethlehem," and that line, "The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight." And Christmas is like that, and the solstice season and the darkness of winter. Hope springs up in the midst of fear. That kind of hope is not optimism. Hope and optimism are different. Optimism rests on the perception that something good is likely or is about to happen. I'm optimistic about the weather tomorrow. I'm optimistic about the next election. I'm optimistic about this or that. Optimism fills our minds when all the signs look good. Hope, on the other hand, is what consoles us when the signs look all bad. Hope is what tells us that in spite of how terrible things are or look or may continue to be, there is nevertheless a chance, a possibility that there will be a turn for the better, because the future is not determined yet. There's always a possibility. The future hasn't happened yet. It's still open, uncertain. And the even better news is that we have the power to shape what the future may be. We all have free will, free agency. Every decision we make that has an impact on the public one way or another can be a force for good. Some of you know that the first Unitarian churches, or the first churches that would become Unitarian anywhere in the world, were founded in the 16th century. And not in Transylvania, incidentally, but in Poland, about 10 years before Transylvania. And those churches and their theologians were the first ones to advocate the idea that people have free will. You know, the Calvinistic religion that they grew up in said that everything was predetermined. And then Isaac Newton came along with his 3 laws of motion and made it seem like we live in a mechanistic universe where if we know the position and the velocity of every particle, then everything can be predicted. The Polish Brethren, back in the 16th century, challenged that idea. They believed that we could not be responsible people unless we had the freedom to act. And freedom to act is an essential outcome of hope. Cornel West, the activist professor he vacillates between Union Seminary in New York and Princeton and Harvard. He's enough of a thorn in people's sides that he moves quite a bit, it seemed. But he said in a speech at Union Theological Seminary several years ago, hope is not passive. It is a practice of defiance, of refusal to accept the world as it is. My own understanding is that hope is grounded in something that encompasses us. If you want to call that God, fine. If you want to call it love or spirit of life or the power of being or the web of existence, names are fine too. But the common idea behind all those ways of naming reality is that we are embraced, encompassed, held, cradled even, by something that is good, something that is loving, something in the universe that strives for beauty and at every moment lures us with our freedom toward decisions and actions that work together toward a vision of the common good and a world of moral beauty. Now, at this point, my sermon is turning theological, so I might as well confess that I am a theological nerd. I like reading theology, arguing about theology, listening to theologians talk. Earlier this week, I sent in my registration for an annual event called the Theology Beer Camp. It's a 3-day gathering of around 600 people typically that features lectures, panels, and conversations with usually a dozen leading progressive theologians from around the country or sometimes from around the world. Ministers and academics, all organized by a quirky theologian named Tripp Fuller, who is also devoted to the cultivation and tasting of craft beer. And there's always plenty of and varied supply of that. At this past October's Theology Beer Camp, Kelly Brown Douglas, an Episcopal priest and a leading womanist theologian, spoke of storytelling as central to religious life. Storytelling as a sacred act of justice. That's actually what the Gospels are all about. They are sacred storytelling. They are not history, we know that, but they are storytelling that embody value, embody aspiration, embody conviction of goodness. We tell our individual and collective stories to remind us of who we are and what is of ultimate value and meaning in our lives. And this has national implications. Arguments over the teaching of American history, for example. Current MAGA attempts to tell our American story and erase the stories of historical enslavement is, as Kelly Brown Douglas put it, nothing less than a blasphemous act. Only when some people's stories are allowed to be told, only when we push them, others, to the margins, do we distort the fullness of history. And to distort history, she said, is to imprison the future. It constricts what we can imagine. It robs us of examples of moral courage from the past. and cripples our ability to imagine and to cultivate a collective moral imagination. That cultivation, that moral imagination is essential to the preservation of hope and of truth, of course. The future is not settled. It hasn't happened yet, and because of that uncertainty, there is space, there is room for hope, like the farmer in the Chinese parable that I told earlier. Hope for change away from present darkness and new light. Hope for joy in the midst of sadness. Hope for justice in the midst of cruelty and tyranny. The future is determined by the moral choices that we make today, by the stories that we tell to one another, to our children, the stories of joy that we sing of at Christmas time, and by the morally informed actions that we rise up and claim as our sacred duty. That is what will give shape to the new year that is about to begin, and to the moral beauty that we hope for in years to follow. Our Christmas hymns tell and retell old stories of imagination, of vision that looks forward to a different world from the one that we know. These hymns and carols are subversive in the way that the spirituals of African American enslaved people were subversive. Songs sung secretly at night, they embodied joy and forged solidarity right under the noses of their enslavers. I was reminded of that setting of African American spirituals in a poem written by a black Milwaukee woman, an activist, 14 months ago on November 6th, the morning after our national election, the election that sent Donald Trump back to the presidency. Addressing her white friends, her white community, who were writhing in agony and despair at the thought of another 4 years of hateful and oppressive government and rhetoric. Here's what she wrote. You are awakening to the same country you fell asleep to, the very same country. Pull yourself together. And when you see me, do not ask, what do we do now? How do we get through the next 4 years? Some of my ancestors dealt with this at least 400 years ago under worse conditions. Continue to do the good work. Continue to build bridges, not walls. Continue to lead with compassion. Continue the demanding work of liberation for all. Continue to dismantle broken systems, large and small. Continue to be vessels of nourishing joy. Continue right where you are, right where you live into your days, and if you are not continuing all of the above in community, in partnership, in collaboration, what is it that you have been doing? What are you waiting for? In words like those, I find that African American writers so often provide a model, a challenge for the actions of resistance that so many ordinary people of our nation are undertaking in ever greater numbers. I opened the New York Times this morning, and in the opinion section, I saw a headline that said, "Resistance to Trump is going." There is joy in the work of solidarity and resistance. I feel it when I've gone to the No Kings rallies. How many of you have been to No Kings rallies? Quite a few. Then maybe you know what I mean. I see ordinary people smiling, laughing, enjoying one another's company, and enjoying the vibe of being with kindred spirits who are in this together with us. That's one of the places that solidarity comes from. But I feel solidarity in singing and storytelling of all kinds, from the subversive Gospel of Luke. And we don't recognize this often enough. The Gospel of Luke and Matthew, particularly with their infancy narratives, are subversive Gospels. They are sticking their thumb in the eye of the Roman emperor. In a culture where leaders were supposed to be born in rich palaces with rich trappings, they proclaim a leader who was born in a feed trough. To poor people, nobodies really. And so from that subversive Gospel of Luke to the ringing speeches of Martin Luther King Jr., from those old Christmas carols to the revolutionary poetry of love that I listened to in the opera Andrea Chenier that was broadcast from the Met and theaters last couple of weeks ago. Maybe some of you saw it. I feel that solidarity and that hope in talking and working with clergy and lay people from many different faith communities who, across theological differences, share a basic faith in the ultimate worth and dignity of every person. I see it in the symbol of the third candle of Kwanzaa, which African Americans are lighting this morning. Ujima, collective work and responsibility, because that is the kind of solidarity that we must respond to, that we must join with others to lift up and to say a huge no to what we see happening around us. And it's also our universalist heritage to welcome the stranger, the immigrant, the dispossessed. No one is to be hated or rejected or written off as unworthy. One of the great universalist ministers of the last century, the Reverend Gordon McKeeman, spoke of universal salvation in this way. God, he said, is finally going to drag the last unrepentant sinner kicking and screaming into heaven. And why is that? Because in the end, because beneath all our diversity, even when we can't see it, we are one. Martin Luther King put it this way: we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied together in a single garment of destiny. Hope calls us on in love and joy and solidarity to incarnate that reality among all peoples, especially those who cannot yet see it. Earth and humanity might yet be fair, and all her people one.